Hello and welcome to another video for Dominion 6. I wanted to go ahead and show kind of a practical use case for the Pain Transfer Sabbath that I had up on the channel the other day. In this case, right, you're thinking you're Baratos, you have access to Blood 3 and Conjuration 5. It's time to put out mass elementals. And there are some tricks to this, and I wanted to issue a correction right here at the beginning too. In the last video, I said it was impossible to take more than 1 damage from a spell being cast into Pain Transfer Community. That is not correct. If you cast a spell with enough fatigue, you can deal 2 damage to your Sabbath Slave, and only 1 of that will get shifted onto the Blood Slave. So we'll go ahead and take a look at that right here. And so you got to be really careful, or at least a little more careful than I thought, when setting these up with off-path casting in particular. In general, right, the spell cast fatigue is going to be something like the fatigue that the spell costs the master. So for our case, right, we're casting an air elemental, which is an air 3 spell and costs, what, 100 fatigue? Pretty sure. We've been doing this a while. We're Conjuration 8. Right, air elemental, 100 fatigue. Same with, you know, like a fire elemental, right? They cost 1 gem, so they're 100 fatigue. And your caster is going to be level 2, spending an extra gem to cast it. We'll get into this for just a moment. So now they're all level 2. They're doing a reinvigoration, so you'll notice this is particularly more difficult when you're not in magic scales. We're just in neutral scales, but in drain it would be even much worse. They got quite fatigued casting that first spell because they're only a blood 1. So even casting Sabbath Master costs them, you know, about 100 fatigue. So in this case, we have them scripted to immediately cast Reinvigoration right afterwards. This may not be something that you can do early on because the way Dominion's logic works, they're going to eat 2 blood slaves to cast Reinvigoration to save on fatigue. So right now, right, that means it cost us 3 blood slaves per master, plus another 2 for our Pain Transfer Sabbath slaves. So that's already extremely expensive before we've dealt any damage to our slaves. Now this particular kind of communion, though, is relatively safe to the blood slaves, as there's not a ton of spell casts. The damage to the blood slave mostly scales with the number of spells cast, and it doesn't matter if it's 10 fatigue or 100 fatigue. We're just worried about kind of popping our actual Sabbath slaves with bonus damage. So they're all getting back to 0, and then they're going to go ahead and start casting elementals. So in this case, we have our Baraton priests that are our Sabbath slaves are fire priests. So that means that when a fire elemental gets cast, they're not going to take as much fatigue because, right, it's going to be that 100. You're then going to divide that 100 amongst all your participants, or it's like, you know, they've got an encumbrance of 3, right? So it's 103 divided amongst all your participants, which is like 34. Then it'll be multiplied by 0.2 because of the Sabbath mechanic that makes the Sabbath slave take extra fatigue damage, and then it'll be multiplied by 2 due to the path level difference of 1 between the Baraton priests and the masters, who are now 2 because they're enjoying the benefits of the Sabbath. For our off-path casters, we have some air guys here who are going to do air elementals. Those are going to cost twice as much fatigue because it's not going to be 2 times, it's going to be 4 times because their path level, they don't have the path at all. So what we're going to see, go ahead and cast a bunch. All right, we've cast 3 air elementals so far, and you can see we've actually taken one of those, dealt enough fatigue, and there is some randomness to this. Once you basically get over a certain fatigue threshold, there's a chance to take more damage. So this guy took a little bit of extra damage because of that air elemental. Right, we cast 3 and we had 1 hit. It's also going to be different per guy. In this case, it wasn't. They both took 2, but we'll see in a moment that it is in fact different, or at least can be. All right, now we've cast 6 air elementals. We've gotten 1, 2, 3, so about half on this guy caused that bonus damage. This guy's actually still only gotten 1, so that's pretty nice. But again, shows you the variance. There goes another 3 air elementals. This guy picked up, I think, another 1. I don't remember exactly. This guy picked up 2 more. So the basic rule of thumb here is if you're going to do this off-path casting of elementals, you want to limit your off-path casts to, well, so 9, at 9, you should be extremely comfortable, right? You'd have to fail all the checks, which isn't super likely. As you start creeping that number up, your odds of a priest dying go up. Obviously, a priest dying will then kill the whole rest of the communion in terms of them getting the path buff. It won't stop the fatigue because they'll still go ahead and put it on, and in fact, it'll stop them casting elementals, so they're actually not super likely to kill the second guy, but still not ideal. In the event you don't want your priest dying doing this. And you can see we actually haven't used up very many blood slaves. I think they started with 20, and they had to cast, back here they had to cast 3 Sabbath spells. That's down 3, and then this guy cast Reinvigoration, probably spending 2, so that's 5. And we can still there's 5, 10. There's still 14 left. So they've actually only really killed 1. It should be a couple because it should be. Let's see. 6, 7, 8, 9, 10, 11, 12, 13, 14, 15, 16, 17, 18, 19, 20, 21, 22, 23, 24. Maybe I put some more saves on them. Because 24, so they each have dealt 24 damage. That's 48 divided by 9 is what? 2, 4, 5, 6? So they should have knocked off like 5 of them. Oh, this guy had some blood slaves because he was not supposed to stand back here. That's what it was. So they've been through 5. That's not that bad. And you can see we put out a metric ton. We'll watch this from the enemy's point of view real quick. Right? We put out a metric ton of elementals. At a quantity that you could not hope to match with only Baratin priests using any other method. Like, eventually, if you give them a gem and have them Phoenix power into a, up to their way up to a fire 2, and then they can spend 2 gems per elemental, like, they'll eventually cast this many. But we had all of our elementals cast by, let's see what combat round. Right there, it would take them till round like 30 plus. Something insane, right? Because they're going to go to sleep in a huge way. Whereas we've got all of our elementals deployed by round 7. That's pretty nice. The fire elementals are double-edged in that they will wander through your own troops, lighting them all on fire, which is fun. But what are you gonna do? Sometimes your chaff gets lit on fire. But so yeah, this is something that you could totally pull off. Again, you want to try and have to limit the off-path casting such as you can, but early game you may not be able to do that. So what you instead need to do is just pick your number of the off-path elemental casts to keep it down low enough not to kill, or within a reasonable tolerance not to kill off your Sabbath slaves. Because one of the big benefits of doing it this way is when you consider the other method, right, where I'm talking about doing like a Phoenix power and Earth power into elementals, that's going to take forever. And, even when they're finished with the last one, they're then going to nap for another 10 turns while they try and get their fatigue back. These guys can go right into casting evocations or whatever. I don't think I have any evocations research, so they're going to do nonsense garbage, but they can go right into casting evocations and continuing to help the effort. Now, again, this is extraordinarily expensive. Each one of these fire elementals costs 2 fire gems, and there's a substantial blood cost here as well. Mostly it's the reinvigoration. You can, if you do this without the reinvigoration, you won't get as many elementals as quickly, but you will still get them out in a reasonably timely manner. I'll go ahead and watch again real quick. You can see how much fatigue one of these fire guys picks up for casting. Duration. Right. So it costs him 20 fatigue to get that. So it is gonna, you know, he's gonna get through, he's gonna waste some time if you don't have access to, you know, that reinvigoration. Another thing you can do is you could use more communion slaves. That's going to increase the blood cost, based on the number of spells you cast, but it's not necessarily the end of the world. It's going to be safer, and that's nice. You also obviously give you guys a higher path boost, which is a double-edged sword. If you do that, you need to make sure to have one of them cast like the relevant power so that your slaves get up to 2 in whatever the primary is you're using. Otherwise, the path difference goes from 1 to 2. You know, right, instead of it being 1, the guy's being boosted up to 2. Now your Sabbath slaves are still at 1 and your guys are boosted up to 3. So that difference of 2 means that instead of twice as much fatigue cast for a higher level master, it's 4 times as much. And so you can actually kill your guys even if they're on path casting, because it's going to be such a disparity that it's like they're off path casting. So that's, you got to kind of watch out for that. You can then, you know, use, if you take those fire 3s, right, they're going to cast the boost. If they all cast the boost, it actually is net neutral. It's like you never did, because they all then are still 2 over, and so it's all times 4. Now that fire elemental, in the case of fire elementals, costs half as much, I think, because you're able to cast it at level 4 instead of level 3. So if everybody does it, it's the same as if no one had done it. So you kind of just want the one guy to do it if you're going to do it this way to avoid issues. You know, if you've got something like enchanted blood, strong blood, enchanted blood, whichever the blood is, I think it's enchanted blood, that's going to mitigate your problem here, right? You guys are sacred, you can bless them up. They'll regen some of it. If you have some way to put regen in the Sabbath, that'll obviously do it too. So you have some other options, but mostly you just want to be a little careful, particularly with the elemental off path. There are a couple other spells in particular that you want to watch out for that are very high fatigue. At least early game, right? This is more of an early game tool, I think, than a late game tool. But things your guys might cast, Blade Wind is 80 fatigue. So that's going to be extremely, extremely taxing on your Sabbath. Thunderstrike is 50. That's pretty taxing too. It's gonna, especially because you may not have access to Storm to actually be able to use that air power or that storm power to get the boost if you're doing an air communion. So you just want to be a little bit careful on that regard. On the other hand, right, this is allowing you to get the maximum amount of power out of these mages. If they die, you know, while you're in the evocation phase after you've done all of your elementals, it's unfortunate, but kind of is what it is. And you can avoid some of these, right? If you're doing just the 2-person version, as again, like something like Baratos, right? As long as you don't cast Earth Power, your guys won't actually be high enough, except the 1 in 4 random brides, to even cast Blade Wind. So you don't have to worry about it quite as much. And again, if you're using the larger group, right? If you're using that group of 4, the Sabbath slaves, that will also be, they're much more resilient because that fatigue is going to be cut by an additional percentage. Instead of being, you know, total fatigue divided by 3 for the master and the 2 slaves, now it's divided by 5 for the master and the 4 slaves. So that goes a long way to reducing the fatigue as well. So we'll go ahead, I'm going to pause, and I'm going to set this up with a 4-person version. And we'll go ahead and take a look at what that looks like. Okay, we're back. So I'm gonna go ahead and show it with 4. These guys added a bunch more masters. We are not doing any of the powers because we have 4. It's not really necessary, although you could do it and it would make them maybe a little safer. I don't think it actually is going to save them very much from the pain transfer part. But, and we're doing lots of Oscar. These are all fire. We've got a mixture of air, earth, and fire here. And what we're going to see as we start summoning is a lot of 1s. Right, they don't take enough fatigue damage, even from the off-cast, right, when there are 4 of them, to trigger that extra point that's gonna hurt them. But the cost is higher. Now, we started with like 30 slaves back here. I think we've just finished our elementals. Yeah, we've just finished our elementals. We had to use 4 up to get everybody in. And so we've got, let's see, 3, 7, 9, 11, 14, 17, 25. So we've only used up, we only used up like 1 so far. There must have been some extra because, again, it ought to be 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6, 7, 8, 9, 10. We can just check. Let's just watch again. Maybe I put more than 30. It's very possible. Let's see. 4, 7, 10, 13, 15, 17, 20, 25, 26, 27. Yeah, okay. 29, 31, 34, 37, 38. Okay, 38. It's tough to see them pop, but they do. But by the time we have finished off all of our elementals, right, we've already lost a pretty good number. We've cast 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6, 7, 8, 9, 10, 11, 12, 13, 14, 15, 16, 17. It's a little harder to figure it out here. 18, looks like 20 or so. That's going to be times 4. So that's 80 damage. So we've lost something like 9 blood slaves. So we took a lot of damage, but we got all of our stuff out. Now we cast a shit ton of elementals. It's funny how much worse the earth ones are for this, at least the way we have it set up, which is not necessarily final, right? Because they trample, they actually get stuck behind our army and don't contribute at all. And this is gonna run into our next problem though, which first of all, these guys are wasting slaves because they're not on the right kind of casting. But there's so many, and each time, now that they've switched to lower cast time spells, each one of those still deals a point of damage. And so we've actually got so many masters here that they are gonna burn through all of our blood slaves. It's close, but they're gonna actually burn through all of our blood slaves and knock out our guys. Kind of right as the battle was ending too. But you do wanna be, again, a little careful with how many blood slaves you bring, because if you don't bring enough, especially when you're using 4 masters, you run some risk. So I think, right, the safest thing is gonna depend on how big the fight is, how many masters you have. There's just kind of a lot of factors. You could also do something like, you know, have your masters route off the field. I don't like that works, but you obviously then don't get that additional spell casting bonus that you sort of had access to before. So in this case, right, we had 11 masters, and that burned through 38 blood slaves in, you know, a fairly large fight, but gotta be thinking about how you want to put this together. So kind of just another interesting little look at this. You know, I'd love to hear anybody else's strategies in terms of anything else that you can sort of immediately do with this. Obviously, yeah, particularly for Baratos, but for anybody, something for like Zabalba, I think would be Horde of Skeletons. Obviously, Baratos loves the elemental spam. Plenty of people with good evocation spam. Lots of good options there. But I'm sure there's some really creative. If you were like LA Paren, and you just happen to have tons of glamour gems, you could go kind of ham on like Illusory Army. So it's just gonna anything you've got blood attached to, you can make it work in a really cool way. So yeah, happy to be able to share this with everybody. I think it's a neat strategy. I have now not used the elemental bit, but I did do an evocation, a small evocation pain transfer Sabbath successfully. So it has worked in the field as well as in the lab, but you're just going to want to be careful with your math, with how many off-path casters you have, and with how many blood slaves you bring. Sort of what you're willing to risk in any particular fight. So that is the pain transfer Sabbath practical elemental use case. I hope everybody enjoyed it, and I'll look forward to seeing you all in the next video. Have a great day.